You may be familiar with Qui Gon Jinn as the Jedi Order's biggest maverick. He was kind of a hippie, believing in something called the Living Force, a concept the Jedi Council wasn't too high on. And part and parcel of Qui Gon's growth into a rebellious Jedi could be attributed to his master, Count Dooku. Jinn was simply a talented and gifted youngling who spent most of his time in quiet corners and near running water. But what set him apart from the others was the fact that he let the Force wash over him almost completely, immersing in its presence instead of focusing more on honing his swordsmanship and footwork. Somehow, he already had a stubborn streak that teachers noticed early on, because he was unafraid to ask why a rule existed and whether it truly served compassion. Ultimately, Count Dooku chose him as a Padawan because he recognized both a sharp mind and a conscience that would not rust. Dooku was the consummate Jedi Master of his era, elegant with a blade and exacting in study. He did not want a shadow. Instead, he sought a student who would test ideas and demand reasons. Their pairing felt almost inevitable because their personalities and ideals clashed, yet they worked harmoniously together. The Council agreed to allow Dooku to take Qui-Gon as his learner, and the young soon-to-be Jedi left the temple for the life of a Padawan under one of the Order's most respected scholars. The first lessons were not flashy. Dooku drilled him in history, statecraft, and the art of standing still until the right opening appeared. More than anything, he insisted that truth mattered, even when it made people uncomfortable. As a Padawan, Qui-Gon walked into border disputes and royal courts that looked polished on the outside and rotten within. Dooku guided him through delicate negotiations and the grim reality that many crises were born from pride. Qui-Gon learned to read a room as keenly as a duel. He saw how Dooku prized clarity and elegance, yet he also sensed his master's growing distance from politics, owing to their exposure to the corruption of many politicians throughout the galaxy. Eventually, the Padawan became a knight who could argue with his master in the afternoon and still bow with genuine respect at night. Qui-Gon's stubbornness made him the perfect antithesis to Dooku's own ideals, yet they always found a way to coexist, even as Dooku's own ideals were straying far from the Jedi Order and the Republic. Soon after, Qui-Gon became a Jedi Master, earning the right to call himself his former master's equal. But, like Dooku, he never earned a seat on the Council primarily because of his defiant and rebellious nature and desire to follow his own beliefs instead of restricting himself to the Council's dogmas. Eventually, he took on apprentices. Chief among them was Obi-Wan Kenobi. He taught Kenobi everything he knew and learned under Dooku, yet allowed Obi-Wan to develop his own ideals. Similar to the dynamic between Dooku and Qui-Gon, Jinn and Kenobi also often had clashing ideals and arguments because of their different personalities and beliefs. Yet they often found a way to coexist peacefully and harmoniously, with Obi-Wan even inheriting the same defiant nature his master was known for. Qui-Gon would have been the one to teach Anakin Skywalker, the Chosen One, in the ways of the Force before his untimely passing at the hands of Darth Maul. Jinn's death was the nail in the coffin of Dooku's trust in the Jedi Order. Dooku believed that had the Jedi intervened in the conflict between Naboo and the Trade Federation, Qui-Gon wouldn't have had to die. With that, Dooku left the Order soon after Qui-Gon's death, allying himself with Dark Sidious and sealing that pact by killing Jedi Master Yaddle. Rael Averross lived on the planet Ringo Vinda until he was 5. He was eventually taken to the Jedi Temple and grew into a fighter who preferred clarity to ceremony. Where other initiates chased perfect posture, Rael chased results. That personality turned him into one of the finest duelists among the younglings, earning the attention of none other than Count Dooku, who took him in as his first apprentice. Training under Dooku allowed Rael to hone his swordsmanship to higher levels. After all, Dooku was widely known as one of the best duelists in the Jedi Order, focusing on elegance, timing, and discipline in his approach as a duelist. Rael learned the same lessons and incorporated them into his art, eventually becoming one of the best duelists when he was finally knighted. As a knight, he and Dooku worked together to train young Jedi initiates in the way of the blade. By that time, they were almost equals in the art of the blade, with Rael matching Dooku's own abilities in mock duels. Rael was also there when Dooku took in a new apprentice, Qui Gon Jinn, whose personality and ideals were different. While Rael was a rough and tough fighter, Qui-Gon was more of a spiritual scholar. But Averross's presence was still essential in building Jinn's character, with Ryle even once telling Qui-Gon it was okay for the Jedi to have sexual relationships without falling in love. At some point before the invasion of Naboo, he also took on his own apprentice, a Thalothian girl named Nin Piana. Teaching steadied him and sharpened his patience. Then a relief mission turned in an instant. Sabotage twisted Nim's mind and put civilians in mortal danger. With seconds left, Ryle made the choice every Jedi dreads. He struck her down himself, something no master ever wants to do. The Council judged him blameless, but that verdict could not touch the fracture inside him. He drifted from the Temple's politicking and teachings to lean more on work as a way of keeping himself from falling apart. People noticed a looser man who laughed to keep from breaking. Underneath the jokes and the bravado sat grief that never fully let go of his shoulder. The Council noticed, treating him as a distraction. This prompted them to send him on a mission to Pijal as Lord Regent to guard the throne for the young Princess Fanry until her coronation. He became part sheriff, part steward, and part lightning rod for every grievance on the planet. Ryle brokered with corporate powers, watched street anger simmer, and tried to keep a fragile peace from splintering. When the stakes rose, he asked Qui Gon Jinn and Obi-Wan Kenobi to test his assumptions and keep him honest. The crisis forced him to face what guilt had been blinding him to, and to choose the people he had been entrusted with instead of seeking personal goals. By the end, he protected Fanry's future without clinging to the throne he had held in trust. Not too long after, Dooku reached out to him to tell him about a secret power he had discovered. The former master was obviously talking about the dark side and his connection to the Sith, but Ryle refused to hear his former master's offers, deciding to stick with the light side instead of falling to the darkness like his former master did. Long before she was Dooku's personal assassin, Asajj Ventress was just a child born among the Night Sisters of Dathomir. But her gifts in the Force were left undiscovered by the Jedi because of Dathomir's isolation from the Republic. And things didn't start easy for her when she had to be given up to the criminal Halstead to save the Night Sisters from a threat. Survival with the criminal on the planet Ratatak hardened Ventress. Eventually, a stranded Jedi named Kai Narek discovered her gifts, offering her a different path as a Jedi. But Ventress was never formally inducted as an initiate or a Padawan, because her master trained her independently and without the Council knowing about it. Still, under Narek's patient teaching, she learned to quiet fear and shape power with purpose. Together they fought to bring a little order to a violent planet. When Narek fell to the warlords who controlled Ratatak, grief hollowed her out. She blamed the Jedi for failing to protect the one person who had believed in her, and anger became the blade she trusted most. Count Dooku entered her life as both opportunity and temptation. He saw a warrior whose talent had been honed by pain, and whose faith in the Jedi had collapsed. Dooku promised training, power, and a place in a grand design that would remake the galaxy, all with Sidious knowing about her existence. With that, Ventress became a rare instance of a Sith training an apprentice with the Master's complete approval. Dooku wanted an apprentice he could order around, train, and eventually use to overthrow Sidious. On the other hand, Sidious knew Ventress would be useful as an assassin and pawn under Dooku. With that, the Count placed twin curved lightsabers in her hands and refined her craft with an exacting teacher's eye. She accepted the role of Separatist assassin, certain that serving Dooku would give her the strength to impose order on the Republic. Under Dooku, she became a whispered threat across the Clone Wars, leading droid legions, going on covert missions, and even clashing with Anakin Skywalker and Obi-Wan Kenobi multiple times. Ventress proved her strength by going against both Jedi on her own on several occasions, even overpowering one or the other a few times. However, everything changed when Darth Sidious decided she had grown too strong. He ordered Dooku to discard her to protect their secrecy. In the middle of a brutal engagement, Dooku turned on his apprentice and left her to die. Ventress survived and returned to Dathomir, where Mother Talzin and the Night Sisters gathered her up and helped her heal. Together, they struck back by empowering Savage Opress and sending him to challenge Dooku. The gambit failed, and the retaliation that followed cost Ventress many of her sisters. After her failure, Ventress reinvented herself as a bounty hunter. The work was risky, but honest about its price, and it rewarded skill over politics. She ran with crews like Boba Fett's, took contracts, and found jobs wherever she was needed. During the bombing scandal at the Jedi Temple, she chose to help Ahsoka Tano when the younger woman had no allies, a choice that hinted at real change. Later, she partnered with the Maverick Jedi, Quinlan Vos, on a mission to capture Dooku and end the war's shadow games. They fell for each other in the fire of that assignment, and Ventress confronted the pull of the dark with new clarity. She sacrificed herself to save Vos and to keep him from being truly lost to the darkness. But death was not the end for Ventress. Given a choice between life and death by the spirit of Mother Talzin, the former assassin chose to live her life anew. Armed with yellow lightsabers, she drifted from one planet to another, working in between jobs to find her purpose in a vast galaxy that had been transformed by the emergence of the Empire. We'll just ignore that her new purpose is kinda open-ended and seems to be a mentorship of some sorts only. Imagine living a normal life as a grunt on your planet before you are plunged into a battle of the death and injected with magical steroids. That's basically what happened to Savage Opress. He was simply a Night Brother on Dathomir, living among the Zabrak clans who worked under the Night Sisters. However, when Count Dooku came to Dathomir to seek an apprentice he could train after abandoning Asajj Ventress, Savage emerged as the victor of brutal trials. With that, the Night Sisters used their magic to give him unnatural strength while binding his mind to their will. However, Savage was meant to be a trap, a tool Ventress wanted to use against Dooku. Ventress turned him into a living weapon, one created to kill Dooku. Though he was meant to be the Count's new apprentice, he was supposed to be loyal to Ventress and the Night Sisters. Still, Dooku trained Savage with ruthless focus, pushing him to prize raw power over restraint and to trust fury more than thought. The results were immediate. On Deveron, he stormed a Jedi outpost and killed Master Halsey and the Padawan Nox, announcing himself to the galaxy with terrifying clarity. Under Dooku, Savage worked more like an enforcer than a true apprentice. He clashed with Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker and showed he could stand against the best the Republic had. Ventress finally chose her moment and confronted Dooku with Savage at her side. Night Sister magic tightened around him while Dooku tried to break him back into line through pain and command, but Savage refused to be a slave to either Dooku or Ventress. In a burst of fury, he turned on them both, ripping the duel apart and cutting his way free. He was done being someone else's instrument, and the galaxy would have to deal with what that meant. Soon after, Mother Talzin gave him a new purpose. She told him that his true brother, Maul, still lived in the shadows. Savage followed a faint trail to the junk world of Lotho Minor and found Maul broken in body and mind, kept alive by hatred and a will that refused to surrender. He lifted Maul from the pit and returned with him to Dathomir, where Talzin restored his mind and forged new legs. Together, the brothers declared their own war. They hunted Kenobi and forced him to fight for his life, then turned to building power. With Maul, he stitched the Shadow Collective from criminals and warlords and helped take Mandalore by force. Their rise ended when Darth Sidious arrived to put his house in order. Sidious struck them both with impossible speed and power. In that final duel, Savage fell in a completely one-sided duel that favored the Sith Lord. Before he became a cyborg, Grievous was once Kaimayan Jai-Shilal of the Kaleesh, a proud hunter people of the planet Kali. However, the Kaleesh clashed with the Yamri, who invaded their planet. Grievous's strength allowed him and his people to prevail against the Yamri. However, with the Yamri having strong ties to the Republic, the Kaleesh suffered under harsh conditions as a result of limitations and sanctions imposed on them. Famine struck Kali, forcing Grievous to harbor deep hatred for the Republic and the Jedi. In the Disney canon storyline, Grievous aligned himself with the Separatists, sacrificing his biological nature to become a cyborg. As proud a warrior as he was, he knew he would never be able to match the Jedi's superior power and skill. The path to becoming a mechanical menace was the only one he could take to kill Jedi. As a cyborg, Grievous honed his fighting skills by working under Dooku as an apprentice, but he wasn't a Sith apprentice because he was never sensitive to the Force. Instead, he simply learned the different forms and techniques the Jedi were taught from an early age. Dooku taught him the practical side of the Jedi arts, even though he never had the aptitude of a Force user. Paired with his cybernetic enhancements, his own lightsaber techniques allowed him to slaughter Jedi across the galaxy, taking their lightsabers as trophies. Grievous's multiple cybernetic limbs gave him an advantage over inexperienced Jedi. Most of his early victims were Padawans and young knights. However, he was often powerless against stronger and more experienced Jedi Knights and Masters. When he often clashed with the best that the Jedi had to offer, Grievous always resorted to retreat. He earned a reputation among the Jedi as a coward, even though he was known throughout the galaxy as the fiercest general working under the Separatists. Everything changed when Anakin killed Dooku aboard the flagship. Grievous became the Separatist last leader, with the Republic fiercely hunting him down to put an end to the Clone Wars. The Jedi sent Obi-Wan Kenobi to Utapau, where the cyborg hid with his forces. Their duel burned across hangars and catwalks. Kenobi carved through armor and arms. A blaster shot tore open the general's chest and turned his engine to fire, killing the former Kaleesh warrior. Kumari Vosa was the perfect example of a Jedi who had it all in terms of talent and skills, but could never get it right in the head. This goes back to the time she was still a youngling in the Jedi Temple, where she showed incredible talent and potential, but couldn't control her emotions. But that didn't stop her from becoming Jedi Master Dooku's attention, as she became a Padawan under his tutelage. Gifted but volatile, she impressed her master with speed and ferocity. Her talents allowed her to excel when she was sent to Galadran to neutralize the true Mandalorians. The operation turned into a massacre. Vosa cut through the opposition and personally killed 20 Mandalorian warriors, which fixed her reputation for skill and aggression. That same aggression and a growing attachment to Dooku convinced the Order she was unfit for knighthood. Dooku refused to recommend her for the trials. Feeling betrayed, Vosa fled the temple and joined a Jedi force trying to stop the Bando Gora on Baltazar. The mission collapsed, the team retreated to Coruscant, and Vosa was captured. The Order believed she had died. In truth, she was dragged to a decaying citadel on Kolma, a burial moon of Bogdan, where torture and cruelty broke her will and pulled her toward the dark side. She turned rage into resolve, broke her chains, and seized the Bando Gora itself. From the citadel on Kolma, she ruled as a dark Jedi high priestess, watching her cult's reach spread through the underworld. With the Force, she molded them into spies and assassins, and at the same time recruited free allies who could keep their wits and handle delicate business. She worked with numerous scum and gangsters as her influence grew. During the Naboo crisis, Qui Gon Jinn's death helped push Dooku out of the Order, and the discovery that Vosa had survived as a cult leader added weight to its break. Dooku became Darth Tyrannus under Darth Sidious. Sidious judged Vosa a dangerous distraction to his plans and ordered her removed. But Dooku avoided a direct duel. He posted a 5 million credit bounty on Vosa, aiming to destroy the Bando Gora. Among the hunters who answered the call were Jango Fett and the Mandalorian Montross. Their pursuit shredded Vosa's network. Jango Fett finished the job when she found and confronted Vosa, who boasted of her past against Mandalorians. However, Fett defeated her despite her powers. Watching from the dark, Tyrannus stepped in and ended her life by asphyxiation through the Force. He then convinced Fett to be cloned for the army he and Sidious had planned. In the years after Vosa's death, her paired lightsabers were passed to Asajj Ventress, who served Tyrannus as a Separatist assassin and sought a place among the Sith. Sora Bulk was born into the wealthy Bulk family on Rule, a moon his clan largely owned, before the Jedi found him as an infant and took him into the Order. Contemplative by nature, he preferred long meditation before acting, and Yoda remembered him as emotionally balanced and strong in the Force, even at a young age. He rejected Weequay customs such as Quay totems, believing many of his people had Jedi potential limited by those practices. Within the Order, Bulk rose to Jedi Master, recorded his reflections in holocrons, and became a famed lightsaber instructor. He mastered every known form and earned the title of Jedi Weapon Master. His favored method paired a standard blade with a Shoto and Jarkai, adapted to incorporate techniques that would later fit Vaapad. That pedigree drew Mace Windu to him when Windu sought a partner to refine Vaapad, a demanding style that moved perilously close to the dark. Bulk sparred with Windu often and was one of the few who truly knew the form, but the attraction to darkness that Vaapad required began to awaken a private fascination he kept hidden behind a serene public face. When war erupted on Geonosis, Bulk and his Padawan Galdo Stouf joined the rescue of Obi-Wan Kenobi and Anakin Skywalker. Shortly afterward, he pursued Count Dooku to Bakura with Thulm. There, Bulk fought hard, but Dooku felled him with Force Lightning and levitated the unconscious Weequay away. The capture mattered because Vapad had already nudged Bulk toward the dark, and Dooku would complete that turn. Dooku worked on Bulk's grief over the Jedi who fell on Geonosis and his loss of faith in a republic he viewed as corrupt. He taught Bulk to treat anger as part of himself and pulled him fully into the dark. Then he staged Bulk's return by allowing him to rescue the newly escaped Thulm and bring him to Coruscant, a deception that boosted Bulk's credibility for covert assignments. After the handoff, Bulk slipped from temple life and was considered missing. Acting for Dooku, Bulk convened a summit of disaffected Jedi at his family estate on Rule. The plan was for Asajj Ventress to strike, and Mace Windu would take the blame. Instead, Windu exposed the setup and confronted Bulk about his fall. With the mask gone, Bulk joined the Confederacy openly as a dark acolyte. He soon stood out among the most notorious Jedi traitors of the war, and even took part in the murder of former Supreme Chancellor Finis Valorum. Dooku then placed Bulk over the Morgukai Shadow Army on Seleucami, a force of Morgukai clones and Anzadi mercenaries bred and trained to kill Jedi in the world's catacombs. He reached High Counselor Oppo Rancisis, whose battle meditation anchored the Republic assault, and assassinated him, shaking the offensive for a time. The campaign pressed on until Bulk met Quinlan Vos, once his lightsaber student and later a double agent who rejected the dark. Bulk tried illusions and Jar-Kai shaped around Vapad, claiming he had perfected the form, but Vos prevailed and killed him, ending Bulk's service to Dooku in a final duel on Seleucami. Tul Skor began as a temple-trained Jedi Knight, discovered young and brought to Coruscant to learn the ways of the Force. He passed his trials and served the High Council on missions, carrying the Jedi ideal into rough corners of the Republic. On one assignment against pirates, his starfighter was shot down over Korriban, and Tukata closed in to finish him in the waist. Jedi Master Dooku arrived in time to save him, driving off the beast and hauling Skor from the wreck. Grateful and humbled, Skor gave Dooku his loyalty long before the galaxy knew the Count would stand against the Order. When the Clone Wars erupted in 22 BBY, Skor reported to Coruscant and received the rank of General in the Grand Army of the Republic. Soon it became public that the leader of the Separatists was Count Dooku of Sereno, the same elder who had rescued him on Korriban. Skor's personal loyalty overrode his oath to the Jedi. Dooku revealed the truth of his identity as Darth Tyrannus and drew Skor into the shadowed path. Skor built a red lightsaber and walked away from the Order to become one of Dooku's dark acolytes. He even built a rivalry with Quinlan Vos, a Jedi who secretly worked as a double agent. From there, Skor's service grew bloodier and more personal. He often underwent trials and missions on Dooku's command. He was but a mere part of the Count's roster of dark Jedi and operatives throughout the Clone Wars. At times, he worked with Asajj Ventress, but rarely with Vos, because of their rivalry and irreconcilable differences. These missions placed Skor in the middle of pivotal battles. But near the war's end, Skor followed Dooku to Seleucami to oversee a Morgukai Shadow army engineered by the Anzat Rath Kelko. That was when he eventually crossed paths with Vos. One more, with the rivals meeting blades when Vos refused to succumb to the dark side completely. During the duel with his rival, Skor was seemingly overpowered. Vos disarmed him before plunging him down to the fires of Seleucami, ending the long arc that had begun the day Dooku pulled him from the sands of Korriban. Cadrian Say began as a Zabrak child discovered early for her sensitivity to the Force, and the Jedi brought her to the temple on Coruscant. In time, she constructed her own lightsaber, which marked a milestone in her path, and she adopted the traditional facial tattoos of her people as a visible pledge. A Jedi Master selected her for apprenticeship, and through missions and lessons, she grew into a capable protector of the peace. When she achieved the rank of Knight, the High Council posted her to long assignments in the Outer Rim. Those distant tours kept her away from Coruscant during the Separatist crisis, and they shaped her outlook while the Republic slid toward war. When the Council recalled the Knights to take command roles in the Grand Army, Cadrian did not return. In that gap, Count Dooku, secretly Darth Tyrannus, turned his attention to recruits who might be swayed to the Confederacy. He corrupted Cadrian to the dark side and invited her to join his dark acolytes. Convinced by Dooku's cause and her disillusionment with the Jedi Order and the Republic, she abandoned her Jedi heritage and accepted a place close to Tyrannus as part of his personal guard. To mark the break, she replaced the focusing crystal in her saber and took up a red blade. She trained and operated beside Tal Skor, becoming one of the Dooku's personal assassins and secret operatives. Under Dooku, she worked with a tight circle that included Skor, Sora Bulk, and the double agent Quinlan Vos. But while she worked alongside her fellow Dark Acolytes, there were several disagreements between them, as they all had different philosophies. She even learned the hard way that there was nothing simple and easy about her new life when Vos didn't hesitate to behead one of the leaders they captured during a mission. However, in a mission to Kifu for talks with Shafe Tinte Vos, Quinlan's aunt, everything changed. Dooku ordered the death of the Shafe, but Quinlan, operating as a Republic agent, broke ranks to protect his aunt and the legitimate leadership. Determined to complete the order, Kadrian lunged for the Shafe to deliver the killing blow and end the confrontation. Quinlan stepped in and struck across her path. His saber cut her at the waist and killed her, exposing his true allegiance in the same instant. Kadrian's story closed on Kifu at the moment her mission failed.